Hi all, thanks for coming to my talk. There's many talks on today, so especially really good ones at this time. So I really appreciate you that you're actually taking the time to listen to my talk. And it's Friday afternoon, the last talk before the end of the conference. So if you've lasted this long, I tip my hat off to you. What I want to, I guess, make sure that I impart today is that this is a taste for adversary emulation. We're going to skim over a lot of details, a lot of topics. So I'm probably going to give you some bad practices, but that's okay. This is a getting started guide. A little bit about me. My name's Domenico Perre officially, but all my friends know me as Mickey. I'm a security specialist at Elastic, covering Australia and New Zealand. Before working at Elastic, I used to work at a large federal agency, and then I've worked across various roles, and including being a bartender, which I still say is one of my favorite jobs, and it taught me to be a good listener, whether you're sober or drunk. In my spare time, if I'm not spending time with family, I'm an average brewer of beer, but I also have the tired eyes of a father. So quickly going through our agenda, the what and why of adversary emulation, where do I start? A little bit about the elastic endpoint and why I feel like it's a good marriage between adversary emulation and SIM. Then we're going to go to a quick demo and final remarks. Now, red teamers be like, you know what? To do adversary emulation, all you need to do is just do a couple of circles and then draw an owl. And this is the idea that they've tried to, I guess, portray, that it's really hard to do it and you have to have years and years of experience. While some of that is true, I don't believe that it's entirely true. And I guess throughout the presentation today, I want to show you why it's quite easy to start somewhere. Now, to give you a bit of a description of adversary emulation, I'll speak verbatim from MITRE's definition, which I feel is very accurate. It uses techniques that have been publicly attributed to an adversary and then chains techniques together in a logical series of actions that are inspired by how the adversary has acted in the past. And I think that's very important because you're probably seeing a lot of technologies that may just do individual techniques, and then it's the ability to chain those techniques together that actually really adds value. And you're going to see some of the features later that allows you to emulate, even down to the level of, adding delays in between actions. So you've got, some realism in there. Why would I ever want to approach adversary emulation? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is to improve your detection and response capabilities. There's a common theory, and I would say theory, it's a common practice of training like you fight. The more you go through a process, the more your muscle memory gets built up in these scenarios. The second thing is improving your own knowledge. Whilst building this presentation, I learnt a new technique about beaconing that I just never knew about until I went through this process myself. And the third and final one, which is not the most it's not the most glamorous out of all of them, is proving gaps before funding. I feel like this is an important part because if normally when you go out and you're acquiring new technology, you have to have a business case that you need to talk through and build up. Where with adversary emulation, you are clearly identifying your gaps, and if you need a new protection technology to deploy, performing these activities helps prove the gap before funding. But the question you may ask is, how much should I rely on the human and how much should I rely on software? And there's a couple of reasons why you may want to choose one or the other, or what I recommend is actually have both in the right scenario. The human is going to have a higher upfront cost, straight up, because you have to get people in and have to spend time. Software is a lower cost and lower barrier. The human, what I appreciate about when you get a partner organization, that they're consultative. So they're going to talk to you about the adversary group, and they're going to be able to do things like persona development or target selection or advanced phishing or advanced OPSEC. When you're on the software side, there's a bit of self-reliance there where you have to actually build the profiles yourself. And I guess the last two, is you've got full spectrum versus limited capability set. And to map that out into MITRE ATT&CK's framework, I just wanted to sort of show here, and this is not, you could argue this diagram here that, you could potentially do delivery with software and weaponization recon, but I guess I wanted to make sure that when you choose, I guess, a partner or human technology, human partner, they'll be able to do the full suite in one go. Whereas with software, you're potentially getting different pieces of software to do individual components. Now on the software side, what software do I choose? And I'm a big proponent of open source tech. Allows you to test software before actually making an investment. And the three that come to mind is Red Team Automation, which is built by Elastic teams, the Endgame team and Atomic Red Team. They have overlap between each other where they're looking at just deploying individual techniques. Atomic Red Team has built out a little bit further now, and you can do full suite campaigns. But where I feel these two lack the user experience, Caldera makes up for that. And the reason why is that it's a completely user-driven experience. So you've got a web interface, and it's much more natural to actually build this and build the activity. So maybe asking, where do I start? I think there's a couple criteria that I like to teach people when talking about this problem and this solution. It's ignoring the initial exploit, and that's a hard thing for security people to grasp their head around. They want to try and detect that first thing as soon as possible, but when you ignore the initial exploit, you realize that those behaviors post-exploitation are quite common, and learning to detect those activities is I feel where you get the most benefit. The second thing is, whether to run in production or not, Chuck Norris tests his code in production, but there's an important consideration here, and that's legal. Imagine that you're running an adversary simulation emulation platform, and it's in the cloud, and you're running on your production network or maybe a government network, and you exfiltrate data, and you run a process, and all of a sudden that data's gone out to the cloud. You've just effectively leaked data into a unapproved location. So consulting with legal is important. Running in dev is still going to give you a lot of advantage. So don't downplay that. But production does have its benefits. The next thing you're probably going to need to know is what techniques. And just like Samuel L. Jackson, it's like say MITRE ATT&CK one more time. I think if there was a buzzer at AusCERT about how many times you've heard MITRE ATT&CK, you're probably going to run out of buzzers. But the reason why I see value in this is that, and I guess reflecting back on when I used to do threat hunting, I used to feel swamped with and I used to freeze in what my next actions, whereas using a framework like MITRE ATT&CK gives you some guideposts to start. Now, I guess I'm going to propose a methodology that you can start with before getting into the full adversary emulation. So, start with a single technique or techniques. So only one technique that you need to walk through, execute it, see the results. Then build a tactic group. So, for example, do something like command and control, C2. Then build out sequences. So, trying to work out between different attack life cycles. So, maybe go discovery, then C2. I'm mincing my words here a little bit, but the idea is that you're just trying to build sequences between different groups or different tactics. That's the word I'm looking for. And then finally, go full-blown adversary emulation. We're actually looking to mimic an adversary. And the reason why I want to go through this approach is that it is at the start, number one is not adversary emulation at all, but you want to make sure that you're starting somewhere and getting that muscle memory by being able to detect. The problem is if you go straight to 4, you've got all these detections that you've got to sort of wrap your head around, and you don't make any incremental improvements. So a little bit about Elastic. I guess the reason why I feel like it's very complementary for adversary emulation is that it's a free and open endpoint security technology, but it's a little bit more than that. It's a endpoint telemetry agent, and we're going to show you why in a few slides. So one of the things that you can do is it's quite simple to get up and running. It's all through the UI. It's centrally managed, so you can have a fleet of fleet of hosts in your environment, maybe you set up a full lab with 10, 15 various hosts to test this, you can essentially manage it through a UI and it's free to deploy. But not only that, you get deep data visibility. When I say deep, we're doing process tree hierarchy. We're looking at process ancestry tree, DLL and driver loads, DNS files. If you think about how long it takes to instrument each of these, this is sysmon, this is maybe a packet capture. There's a lot of components that you have to think about when trying to get visibility into when you're doing adversary emulation. Plus, you've got the issues of different platforms, Mac OS and Linux. Normally people focus on Windows only, but there's these other operating systems, and the endpoint really provides that. Now, if you wanted to, you can actually turn on prevention mode, but when you're trying to perform your adversary emulation, I normally switch over to detect only and to see what triggers and let things go through so that at least I know that if my prevention fails, I've got a stop gap at the end to prevent, or to detect, sorry. So what would it look like if you're going to interrogate? I'm going to go through this in a demo. The beauty about using the Elastic Stack, and this is in the free tier, the basic tier, is that you'll be able to look at the full process tree and you'll be able to see the extent of any attack. And it's such a powerful visualization that lets you know, what process has been executed, how processes are communicating between each other, the time it takes to run a subsequent query. So there's the level of detail you get in this view is amazing. So a little bit about my environment. It's fairly simple. I've got Caldera running in the cloud. Also, I've got a Windows host running in the cloud. I'm running sysmon, collecting Windows security event logs, and also the endpoint security agent. Now with Caldera, it compiles the binary through PowerShell in Golang, which is pretty cool. And then I'm just sending this data to Elastic Cloud. So for listeners on this talk, you can spin up a free 30-day trial of Elastic Cloud, or alternatively, you can run this on-prem. So you're pretty flexible in your deployment options. Now, to get started with Caldera, I normally pick the easy way, which is Docker run, specify the name Caldera host name, and you'll get the latest updates. They're pretty good at updating a lot of these, updating their code and their Docker instance. So this just makes sure that the ports are exposed, and then you can select Docker logs Caldera to find out the username and password. So default login, pre-built logins for you. So very simple. You're up and running in a single line. And the reason why I like about the Docker format is that you can just spin it up and spin it down, and you don't have to worry about that. So now I'm rushing through and make sure that I've got adequate time for a demonstration and also performing some Q&A at the end. So let me flick to my demo. Where I'm going to first start is in the Elasticseam view page. And when you think about the problem that you're trying to solve, when you're trying to search all your data and collect all your data in one location, speed becomes a very critical factor. So a little bit about what you're going to see today. I'm going to walk you through how the SIM is used, but also how you can get information from Caldera and run operations. So first off, what you want to do when you're setting up your adversary emulation lab is go into administration once you've got an enrolled agent, and the documentation is pretty good for this, but switch it over from prevent to detect. And the reason why is that you want to make sure that you can test some of these detections at the later stage of the campaigns. So I'm going to jump back into the overview page. I'm going to switch to Caldera now. You are presented with just this blank page, and I was confused at the start, but if you click in the top left-hand corner, you've got the navigate icon. And what I generally recommend is jumping into the training module. And the training module gives you, sort of a blue certificate, and it's quite simple. So blue certificate and user certificate, user is the one you want to go for. It just walks you through some of the activities that you probably want to do when you first start utilizing the platform. This is what I really love about it. Like, they've really thought about everything when it comes to making this experience natural. What we're going to do is we're going to jump back to, I guess, agents. So the three components that you're probably going to be dealing with quite often is agents, adversaries, and operations. So agents have capabilities that are in adversary groups, and then you perform operations with agents. So as you can see, I've already got a agent deployed on my web server, and it's an elevator prompt. I use PowerShell. One thing I'm going to grab straight away is this process ID. And the reason why I'm grabbing this process ID is that I'm going to use it later when I'm trying to do the detections. So I can kill agent, I can see a lot of the information about this. So the important part here when you want to deploy an agent, there's a couple things you need to change. When you select the agent, you got a couple here, and you can actually even bring your own agent if you want. They walk through that process, which is pretty neat. But I normally just select the Golang agent. It's the least barrier because I'm trying to least barrier entry because I'm trying to ignore the exploitation phase. And if you select Windows or any operating system, it gives you sort of a string to use. Now, what I recommend is, or what you have to do, is replace the four zeros to the IP address or domain name of the Caldera server. Changing the group is super important because the group red, there's a little hint when you're starting up the red group. If you keep the group as red, it prevents you from advancing to the next levels in the training course. So just change it. I'll create my own for the time being. And the reason why you want separate groups is that you may run different operations on different groups. So an opportunity could be is you create a group for lower privileged agents, and then you create a group for higher privileged agents. In the interest of time, I'm just making sure that I'm doing just one group. So now I've got that, I can, change some things. I can change the beacon times, min and max. I recommend doing something like 10 and 10, keeping it really short. And the reason why is because I feel that by changing this beacon interval, you can practice the art of detecting beacons. And I learnt a lot when utilizing a smaller beacon time to help me understand how to detect that. You've got this known pattern and you can adjust it as you want. So there's jitter in here. So now I've got these agents, they're online. Now I'm going to close this down. I'm going to select adversaries, and to go into edit mode, you've got a list here. You can pick on, but I'm gonna create my own adversary group, and I'm gonna secure the add button, and I'm gonna call this AusCERT. Call it technical. So, and then you can say you have to give a description. So I got annoyed with this last time, so I said don't tell me what to do. Now to make it simple, just for today, I'm going to go to adversary, and I'm going to select discovery. I'm going to click on add to adversary, and then what I can do, so notice how you've got these icons here. That means this profile works across all. So for now, what I'm going to do is just delete all of these items here. Save this. Then I'm going to save that. Sweet. And you'll notice down the bottom you've got adversary saved, and the UI is not the best, but it's okay. So what I normally do is close and re-add just to make sure that I'm not overriding the existing profile. And then we'll also sequence or tactic. So a group of items. Again, don't tell me what to do. Okay, add adversary, and I'll choose discovery here, and I'll do the whole swath. So I'll pick all of these, and then I'll select save. Simple. Adversary saved, and now you've got yourself set up. The next thing you want to do is create an operation. So what I'm going to do is again flick over to add operation name. I'll go single, and I normally expand the group. So you select the group you want. Make sure the profile you select is the one you created. I mean, you've got some pretty good ones. Worm 1 is lateral movement. You got thief, which is data exfiltration. So you've got some pretty good ones there. I normally close the operation. That can generally clean up items after it's done. Make sure it's running autonomously. I can adjust some stealth factors here. I just normally just do plain text obfuscation, but for the demo today, I'm only doing 1 and 1, so 1 and 2. So making sure that the activity is executing in a short amount of time. If I wanted to, I could even schedule this at night, which is pretty cool, but we're going to ignore that today. So we're going to go start, and that's going to go through and run the operation. So while I'm doing that, because I've got X1 and 2628, I'm just going to jump into the timeline here to make it simple for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go process.pid is 2628. Save. and that's just going to give me all the relevant information for that particular process. And I'm just going to drag the OR field to make sure that as I'm adding this through, I'm just focused in on the exact host. Now let me just double check that operation's gone. So what you see is there's a little X mark here, and that means that the operation's still going. It takes some time to do this, so we'll just wait for this to return. And we're done. So notice that we have username, Perre, simple. Let's jump back to the console. Expand my view so it's easier to look at or fresh my view. And the way it works that you go from top to bottom, the most you want to refresh it so that you've got the most up-to-date event view. Now we select analyze event. It gives us this process tree. So I've created a fairly obvious process name here. But you start to get a little bit more understanding about, here's this terminated process. You've got 5 events where you've got 1 library to load, 4 files being written. But because I've got PowerShell transcript logging, I've got it in PowerShell log.log, so I can actually see that this file has been executed. I can look at some of the network traffic between each of these, how long between each of the processes that were run 15 minutes ago. This is 927 milliseconds. Like, you start to get an understanding of what is going on. But this is just the start of the events. This is the start of your campaign. If you want to actually go a little bit further, you can start to build out a bit of picture. So network events will go back now. So let's go something that's a little bit more noisy. And what I'm going to select this time is add another campaign, and we're going to call this, let's call it discovery. And we'll select I could do single technique, I could do the tactic. I'll just select the tactic, why not? And I'm going to start that, and this is going to take us some time. Starting to see 5 processes, and the ones that will fail, it'll tell you that it failed. We'll give you the response. Here's the active user, that was the one before. We're starting to get a couple more items. Who's the local users? Does that come back? Yep, sweet. And you can see I'm using getWMI object for that process, and this one here is using a bit of PowerShell, WMI Win32 process. So you've got a couple other items that are happening. And the interesting part about this, when I jump back to the rotor view and refresh the page, and the operation's still going, I start to get a bigger picture about how I can start to detect these items. Let's go back event PowerShell. I'll set there some WMIC in there. Let's refresh. Let this data come in. 132 events. Let's get some more. Looks like that's it. Great. And now you're starting to see a little bit more, I guess, breadth. And so here, you've got PowerShell.exe spawning and test.exe. A lot of PowerShell. So if you think about some of the detection scenarios you can look for, using something like event query language, or using another technology, you can start to look for, show me the distinct count of process IDs by executable, for example, or show me a sequence where PowerShell spawns an executable and then spawns PowerShell again, or PowerShell to NL test, or any executable to NL test. So we haven't really covered EQL today, but suffice to say that you can leverage this technology in Elasticsearch today to build up some really cool detections. So you just saw how easy it was to walk through adversary emulation, and you could tell that I did skim over certain scenarios there. But what I want to, I guess, impart with you is a couple of key takeaways. The first one is start small. Don't try and boil the ocean. Try some of those techniques, those single techniques up front, and then build on that. Don't hesitate. Anyone can do this. This activity didn't take me a long time to build. It was really simple. Leverage partner systems to build profiles. So it's really important that as you mature to those later stages, that you get a partner to help you. If you don't have your own threat intel team, get someone to help you build these profiles out in Caldera. Use Elastic, of course, because it's awesome and it's free, and it provides a ton of value in this scenario. And finally, don't forget about the initial exploit. That's not really important how they initially exploit you. What's important is what happens after, in my humble opinion. So would you love to write on your resume, I do adversary emulation? Well, to fill the gap that we have today, we are running a dedicated workshop later in the year, and there's a link below. So take a screenshot of me and this website if you want, and register your interest, and we'll send some details out when we're actually booked or have a confirmed time. Now, finally, I want to make sure that people have time to ask questions. I'm always available. You can catch me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Nicky Perre, or nicky@elastic.co. Thank you.
Right, perfect, guys. I think Mickey is in the room for some Q&A, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if we can throw it on now.
I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for coming to the talk. It's probably sitting down in a virtual conference is pretty rough. So it's not like as well engaging as the face-to-face one. But appreciate you coming to join. Anyone have any questions? I guess about what I covered. This I've really skimmed the surface, like super skim. Like imagine I chucked a rock and skimmed the top of the surface of the water. There's so much more to, I guess, what I had to, what you can do. So by all means, if you have any questions, hit me up in chat. If you want to keep it private, or put in the chat window. Right, thanks, Anne. That's a good point. Yeah, if people want to join me, I'm going to be at the booth doing virtual booth duty. So come have a chat with me there. Thanks, Will.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, guys. So I think this about wraps it up for the sessions that we've had today. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you all enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. We are going to break for afternoon tea, and there's a speed debate on in the main room, if I'm not mistaken. So enjoy yourselves, have a good weekend, all the best, and we'll see you next time.